Wherever you look, despite
Deficit
recession,
budgeting?
Yes.
Is that part of your promise?
If it had to be.
You threw away their surplus. They left you with a $200 million surplus.
The cupboard was bare, Jack.
Training British Columbians into a skilled workforce is an essential part of our economic recovery plan. Skilled British Columbians working with our resources means jobs now and real growth in the future.
while recession is a reality we all face, BC is planning and working now for recovery.
BCTV, our best show.
Good morning. Last spring, much to the consternation of every political wiseacre in the country, the halo-ridden government of Messrs. Blakeney and Romanow in Saskatchewan was wiped out by a newcomer, a man called Devine, who dared to sweep the NDP out of office after they controlled that province for more than 30 of the last 38 years. Premier Grant Devine is here this morning to tell us if he's still keeping his promises, and whether or not his province is in the same tricky position that BC is, with our resource industries teetering at the edge of disaster. And later in the program, we're going to give you an American skill from Dr. Richard Ellenbogen of Los Angeles. The Americans are tops in almost everything, well, almost everything. And if you want to look beautiful, Ellenbogen will do it for you, one way or another. But he told me before the program, there's no way he can make me look beautiful. But seriously, and first, we're going to have a good session with Grant Devine, the Premier of Saskatchewan, and just find out if old-fashioned right-wing Toryism works in Canada in 1980, what year is this? 2, after the break. Grant Devine is the Premier of Saskatchewan. It's the first time we've met him on the Webster program. You're so young. You're only, what, 38?
That's right, Jack.
You've been in power how long?
7 months.
And now, had any of your cabinet ministers had any experience in government prior to the election in the spring?
Not in government. One or two of the cabinet ministers might have been involved in an earlier administration, but never elected, just as executive assistants or something like that. So we're virtually a new ball team.
Perhaps because you're a new ball team is why you have been accused of being so particularly brutal about cleaning out all those whom you regarded as enemies from the previous administration.
Well, I wouldn't suspect that many people in Saskatchewan would consider us brutal. We inherited about 28,000 employees. I believe we've changed about 100 deputies and or top-level people in Crown corporations, so it's not all that many. Saskatchewan is accustomed to having a fairly large public sector. They just want it run well and run efficiently, and that's what we're about to do.
One newspaper story I saw accused you of a reign of terror. An NDP official had been laid off, or an official with an NDP background had been laid off, said you were conducting a veritable reign of terror.
Well, if you get to know me, you know that I am not a terrorist, and far from it. Just a farm boy who happened to become premier and want to see an awful lot of common sense in government. And mostly that's what we're about to provide. And I believe the Saskatchewan people, and perhaps the Canadian people, are looking for, is mostly common sense, not about a great deal of rhetoric from the left or the right or anything else, but pragmatism, dealing with national and international affairs like we must, because we have to compete against Americans and Japanese and West Germans and so forth.
Not to drag you into our particular political problems, but certain blames have been laid here, and I wanted to ask you, did your people go down the list of all employees and fire everybody who had been an order in council appointment by the NDP?
By no means, not at all, because there have been thousands of them. So we didn't touch maybe 0.5% of the population in terms of public employees. So,
But you have changed the people at the top of all the crown corporations, all deputy ministers, all PR guys working in the government by order and council?
Not even all of those. We've changed maybe 70% of the deputies, and we'll be changing a good number of the people in the chief executive officers of the crown corporations. Mostly because we negotiate for hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis with the federal government, and we couldn't be beginning to develop our strategy and then have somebody run out and tell Mark Lalonde what was going on in terms of Saskatchewan strategy. So we have to have the loyalty at the top has to be there, but 99.9% of the government employees and public servants are professionals, and we respect them for that, and they'll stay that way.
And you haven't fired any members of the Saskatchewan Government Employees Union in this purge?
Not that I can recall. We've, like I said, we've moved maybe 1/2 of 1% of the public service. But in key positions, there have been changes because they just frankly disagreed with the new government. And people elected in a democracy, a new government. They wanted a new direction in terms of how some of the crown corporations are being operated, so they're going to get it.
With my eye on Ottawa and some of the no-cut contracts for the civil servants, did you face any no-cut contracts or long-term contracts where you had to buy off the services of these people whom you weren't going to trust for the future?
No, most of the changes were linked to a normal public service contract where there is a provision whereby if people are going to take a new position that they have, I forget the formula, but it's so many dollars for so many months worked, et cetera, et cetera.
And all your new deputy ministers on these key positions which you're replacing are, of course, all good members of your Conservative Party.
Well, I would think most of them haven't been involved in politics that much. The deputies that I can think of in social services and agriculture and so forth are hired because of their professional expertise. That is, they're not working against our administration, but they haven't been active in campaigns. If some of them were, that would be quite all right with me, but the most important thing is that they're professional and they're going to be loyal to our cabinet.
I noticed the NDP is saying that you had a $200 million surplus when you moved into power, and you've already frittered that away and now have a $200 million deficit. Is that true?
No, it's not true. The NDP forecasted a balanced budget with a $200 million surplus. When we opened the books, frankly, Jack, the cupboard was bare. There was supposed to be $1 billion in the Heritage Fund, and it's just not there at all.
You have a Heritage Fund too?
Well, we inherited the so-called Heritage Fund, but there's no money in it. They lent about $800 million interest-free to Crown corporations. We have about 28 Crown corporations in the province of Saskatchewan, and I believe only one will make money this year, so they're losing a great deal of money. Their estimates on potash revenues and oil revenues were what you might call an election estimate. They were a little bit high, so when we took over, we found that there just wasn't the money there that they said there was. Now, in terms of our campaign promises, we said that we would protect people in terms of interest rates. At that time, they were about 18 or 19%, and we have, and the opposition voted for it. The NDP thought it was a good idea. Similarly, with respect to gas tax, 2/3 of the price of gasoline is tax. It was getting worse. So we said in the province of Saskatchewan, because we're net energy producers, we're not going to tax ourselves anymore, and the NDP voted for that as well. So those two provisions, plus the combination of not having any money when we took over, means for the short run we'll have a relatively small deficit, but the future is bright for the province of Saskatchewan.
Now, you removed 6.4 litre from the gas tax, provincial gas tax.
Yes.
Let me get this other thing clear, though. The $1 billion Heritage Fund, which was, the public was told was a cash fund, turned out to be bereft because they had loaned $800 million interest-free to money-losing Crown corporations.
There you go. Exactly.
That's right.
Yes.
What's the one Crown corporation that makes money?
I believe SMDC, Saskatchewan Mining Development Corporation, may turn a profit this year, but virtually all of the others, maybe one or two exceptions, but I would say 1 out of the 28 will make some money. The other thing that they did that was probably hurt them the most in rural Saskatchewan, and a lot of people in British Columbia can identify with this, is that they bought over 1 million acres of Saskatchewan farms for the government. Then they leased the land back out to the farmer, and he would be called a sharecropper. Well, it just took fortunes out of the Saskatchewan family farm and the rural communities, and it became extremely unpopular. The government of the day was bragging that they were making all this money, buying it from mom and dad at $60 an acre and trying to sell it to the children at $1,000 an acre. But who did they take the money from? They took it from Saskatchewan people, Canadians, and it was extremely unpopular and a tremendous waste of money. because it didn't produce anything, it didn't create any jobs.
You merely
and it
increased the
costed-
value of the land.
Well, it did that. It speculated on the backs of the farmers, and the young people now that want to get into farming have to pay that $1,000 an acre because the NDP administration were going out to say, well, we'll run the farm better than you can. And that's, I suppose, the thing that really caused people to say,
Let's do
I don't
that
trust
once
them
again.
anymore.
Because we don't, the lack of communication across this country, as you well know, is abysmal. $1 million,
1 million acres.
1 million acres, they bought from whom?
Farmers.
Paid them cash for it.
Yes.
Bought them out.
Yeah.
At $60 an acre.
Well,
Whatever.
$60 to $100 an acre. Yeah.
And they were then leasing that back to other farmers. The
Yes.
same farmers?
The same, or their children or neighboring children.
So now what are you going to do with that million acres, which is owned by the government but under lease?
We've said that we will honor the leases if people still want to lease it, but we have stopped buying farmland and put in a farm purchase program so young people can buy the farm. And we're helping them in terms of interest rates. So rather than pay 12, 15, 18% interest, we'll say right now a young farmer in Saskatchewan can get up to $350,000 at 8% money to help buy the farm, and the government is not going to buy the farm anymore.
There's no way you can cut the price of that land at the moment, though.
Well, the land will have to go at market value, or else you'd give somebody a big gift. I mean, it has to be something reasonable, and we can do it on municipal assessment and sales in the area to arrive at something that's
Is there
reasonable.
any response to your plan to sell it back on these 8%?
There's a tremendous response. As one man said to me, and he spoke broken English, Ukrainian, I believe, in Blaine Lake, Saskatchewan. He says, Grant, 200 years ago, if there had been a sign up in Saskatchewan or in Canada that said land for rent, come on over, he said we wouldn't be here. We come over to own our own farm, and now the government's buying it from us.
But at
And
the
that
t-
summarized it all for us.
At the time, was there not a great approval by the farmers of getting the chance of selling their farms for cash and living off the interest?
Well, they can do that without selling it to the government, and that was the problem, and they got hooked by that. Because the government says, well, we'll buy the land and then we'll rent it at a subsidized rent to your children. But then when the children came to buy, it had gone up $500 or $600 an acre. And it was a catch-22, and they really caught and speculated with Saskatchewan
And
farmers.
what I meant to the Saskatchewan farmer had never been as socialized in his brain as Blakeney and Romanoff thought they had been.
Well, it's one thing to support, and I would say this, the Tommy Douglas phenomena. If you have trouble in Saskatchewan when it's tough times, will help you. But it's quite another to say, I'm going to buy the farm. And there's a significant difference, I believe, across the nation. People expect governments to help them during difficult times with interest rates and gasoline prices and so forth. But that doesn't mean the government comes in and buys the business or buys the farm. Significant change.
Grant Devine telling you the secret of his election victory, correct?
There you go.
After the break. You got to be nice to the victor in one of our major elections, perhaps because there are no skeletons in the cupboard yet. But one of the best tags in your whole election campaign was that you were going to put down the red carpet instead of red tape for business. Did you think that up?
Oh, I think just one of our campaign managers thought that up.
And you have another slogan on a little badge, which I want to see. See it? Saskatchewan, open for business. Was that part of your campaign, or is that part of your plan now?
Well, it's part of our industrial strategy. That Saskatchewan has so much, Jack, in terms of farmland, virtually half the agricultural land in the nation, potash, uranium, coal, heavy oil, and so forth, that we said this country needs to have somebody that can help it in recovery. We have a lot to offer, a lot of potential, and the province is now open for business. Come and look at Saskatchewan. So we held a news or a financial post conference, a joint venture that invited 500 or 600 men and women from across the country to look at our province.
Yeah, but don't kid me that you really are any more open for business than any other province.
Oh,
I
well-
mean, what have you done that opens it for business? You still get all your farms, your boards, your crown corporations, your appeals, your ecological concerns, and your new Tory-type civil servants who will become big in the head in due course.
Well, if you give me about a minute, I'll tell you why it'd be a good idea to come into Saskatchewan. We have the lowest rate of inflation. The CPI's running about 7.4. We have the lowest unemployment in the nation. We have the lowest priced gasoline in the nation because there's no tax in Saskatchewan, about $1 a gallon cheaper than places like Toronto and Quebec. And we have one of the most highly potential areas for economic activity that you can find in Canada, plus 13% interest rates for homeowners from now until 3 years from now, plus 8% farm money. That combination of a great deal of heavy oil, plus potash, coal, and uranium makes Saskatchewan a very interesting place for investors.
Let's take it one at a time. The 8% for businesses, is that given to outsiders coming in?
Anybody that moves into the province of Saskatchewan gets the same competitive edge that people who live there now receive. And that's in terms of the mortgage money, in terms of economic activity, CPI, gas prices, or interest rate protection.
Now, what is your unemployment numbers?
About 6.5 unemployment.
How many people have you got on welfare?
I couldn't tell you. Our unemployment is higher now than it has been in the past.
Just a minute, we're at 12.5. You're at?
6.5.
Maybe that's because all your unemployed have left and come to British Columbia for the winter.
Well, they left under the previous administration, but they're coming home now to Saskatchewan.
No actual sign of that yet,
Oh, yes,
is there?
yes. People are coming back to invest because they're looking at the strength of the province.
Your mortgage relief rate is at 13.25 at the moment. Is
That's
that
right.
correct? For unlimited numbers of people? Or?
Yes. Anybody that wants to apply for it, and a maximum up to a mortgage of $50,000.
Well, you didn't suffer so badly from the inflation because you didn't have the unlimited prosperity that was apparent here on the coast a couple of years ago, did you?
Well, I suppose the cyclical nature...
Affluence, affluence.
The cyclical nature of international markets that can have an impact on places like British Columbia and Saskatchewan are important. The timber business and the lumber business is tied to the international markets, and that's difficult to cope with. Same in our case, potash sales have changed a lot with cycles, so has the oil market. But one of the major changes and impacts, and I have to throw it out, is things like the National Energy Program that just brought Saskatchewan oil businessmen right to their knees. And we've modified that, had tax targets and changes that have encouraged our industry now to move to 110% capacity, and we're proud of it.
Even at that, the Liberals gave you some concessions, did they not, on your heavy oil production?
Well, we're negotiating with the federal government all the time with respect to processing our heavy oil, and we love to move in the area of an upgrader and a refinery and so forth, which is a fairly significant mega project, if you'd like to call it that.
Give me a blunt, concise opinion on the national energy policy, Mark Lalonde and Prime Minister Trudeau, if you wouldn't mind, Premier Devine.
Well, I would suspect that the country would have been in much better shape had we had some different people in the driver's seat in Ottawa. The things that they have done with respect to our economy and our province, and I can only speak for Saskatchewan, with the budget and the National Energy Program, even the impact of fear in many cases has caused us a great deal of harm. It shut down, in the riding that I represent, Saskatchewan producers of energy, and that's too bad.
Just shut them down altogether.
Shut them down altogether, and we're bringing them back up. Because we were closing our pumps and bringing it in from Mexico and Venezuela, and the farmers in my riding were driving around the jack pumps, and the jack pumps were still, and they were charging him more and more tax to put diesel fuel in his tractor, and he wasn't even pulling the oil out of the ground that he was farming around, and they were bringing it in from Mexico, and he says, I don't think those fellows are on my side. And he could make a pretty good argument when he went to church on Sunday morning.
And they're still doing that, or they're not bringing in the stuff from Venezuela?
It's getting better, and I'm happy to say that perhaps the consistent message coming from the Premier in this province, Premier Lougheed, myself, and others, is having an impact on the attitude, perhaps, of the federal government, and I hope it continues to change.
What are your plans to cut out the fat and social programs? Because Saskatchewan, like the Lumpet, sir, has been the leader from Tommy Douglas's days forwards in intelligent, humane, and decent treatment of people with problems. What are you cutting out of the socialist fat in the long-established NDP systems?
Really, what we are changing is the rate at which the government was going into the private sector. Health budget is up. We do not charge deterrent fees in the province of Saskatchewan, or health fees. We're
Charge
spending
premiums?
No. We
No
don't.
premiums?
No.
Will you bring back premiums?
No. We have increased the budget in social services by $30 to $40 million. We've increased the budget on education. We're building schools and hospitals. What we have to stop, and what I'm sure that you're aware of here and across the country, is the government from going in and buying farms, buying businesses, buying oil companies, and buying things that the normal man and woman can run better, or men and women can run better than the government. And that's the significant
I
difference.
think you mentioned 38 Crown corporations?
28.
28.
Yeah.
How many of them are you going to close down?
May not close down any. We're taking the public utilities like SaskPower and SaskTel, and we want to run them as smoothly and as efficiently and effectively as possible, setting up a Public Utilities Review Commission. The other crowns that are in the markets, we say, is it possible for them to make money? If better management will allow them to make money, fine. If they are losing money and have lost it consistently, Saskatchewan people are about the same as anybody else. They don't want to put good money after bad, and they say, put that money into maybe a heavy oil upgrader, into irrigation, something like that that is more productive. So, very pragmatic approach that says if it can be run well, do it, but certainly don't nationalize any more companies, don't nationalize the insurance business, don't nationalize the CPR or some other things.
Don't you have Saskatchewan government insurance for automobiles?
Yes.
Haven't you found that it's a great wasteful monopoly and that you want to get out of it?
I've found that it has lost a great deal of money, and people are fed up with it losing money, so we are trying to reorganize that so it does run on an efficient, effective, break-even basis.
How can it? There's no competition.
Well, it has a monopoly position and pays no income tax and pays no interest. It should be able to break even, and that's what we're going to try to do.
And if it doesn't break even, will you wipe it out next time round?
Well, I believe with good management it can break even, but if it doesn't, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
But surely that's a complete breach of your principles, allowing a government monopoly when free enterprise private insurance companies are just biting their nails to get back in and compete, and they would say give better service.
But Jack, I think you have to remember something.
You're stuck with government insurance.
No. It was the Progressive Conservative Party that established the Canadian Wheat Board. It was the Progressive Conservative Party that first traded wheat with mainland China, in the sense that we recognize through Air Canada, through the Canadian Wheat Board, through other public institutions, that there's a role for the public sector to complement the private, but not compete with it. And there's that delicate balance. To date, I believe what you see across the nation is this holus-bolus move, particularly by the federal government, into all kinds of areas where really I'm sure it won't succeed. If there are areas we can have country-to-country negotiations, government-to-go negotiations in potash, other things, we're prepared to do that, but not take over the private sector when we're in the middle of those programs.
I see, but philosophically you're against a thing like Saskatchewan government insurance.
Not if it's well run.
You're only half a Tory.
Oh, I'm a very pragmatic politician in North America
But where a
today.
Crown operation loses money, you're not going to stand it out and whistle and Dixon.
That's right.
More with Grant Devine after the break. Listening to Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan, our newest and perhaps our brightest political face in the country at the moment, certainly our most enthusiastic, it would seem that Saskatchewan is the leader in almost everything. You tell me you've only got 6.5% unemployed. Inflation, 7.5%?
About 7.5. Lowest gasoline prices and the best interest rate program in the country.
Yeah, there was something I wanted to ask about that, though. You froze all your gas and electricity, and telephone rates, didn't you?
Utility rates we froze until the end of 1982 and set up a Public Utilities Review Commission so that I suppose the cabinet ministers alone can't make the decision on utility rates, so the public can be involved, and they like that.
Mind you, one thing is clear, is it not, sir, that you will not be giving any wage increases to any Saskatchewan government employees this year?
Well, the increases are linked to our recovery program, which is the rate of inflation in Saskatchewan, minus 1%. We call it CPI minus 1. So that our recovery package is on the solution side of the inflation problem. So we've targeted the CPI and say if we're always below it a little bit, then in fact we're on the solution side, not on the problem side.
In fact, you're going along with Trudeau's 6 and 5.
No, I'm not.
Well, you said 7.5 less 1, 6 and 5, 6.5.
Well, if CPI goes to 3, we'll be CPI minus 1. If it went up to 8, we'd be CPI minus 1. The problem with the 6 and 5 program is that it's rigid, and that's all there is. There's nothing else that goes with it. It's just only 6 and 5. People have to work their way out of a recession, and there's nothing in 6 and 5 to help people work their way out of it.
Well, now, are you deeply involved in the coast and the problems on the waterfront here, which have lost, what, $100 million or $200 million to your farmers? Have you any suggestions for improving the lack of productivity on the waterfront in Vancouver, which must cut very sharply into your revenue and problems?
Well, I believe it not only cuts into Saskatchewan's revenues, but it cuts into Canadian problems because of balance of payments. So, certainly speaking on behalf of Saskatchewan farmers, it's extremely frustrating when they sit out there thousands of miles away from the action and know that they can't market their grain. And they just say, well, you'd think that government could come up with some sort of a solution where business and labor could get together and work out something over time and continue to work while they're negotiating. And whether it's some sort of mechanism that allows them to do that, because the whole nation loses. We all lose. Saskatchewan people, Canadians from coast to coast.
Well, with respect, I haven't got very good news for you, sir, because the imposed settlement really solved none of the problems, and it will resurface again in one way or another before the winter is over. However, I wanted to ask you, have you been embarrassed by any events of your supporters or your government officials or your government since you were elected? There must have been one little two-bit embarrassment you had.
Well, embarrassments are part of public life, I guess, and as I've had the opportunity to kick some footballs at football games. Some of them were good, some might not be as good.
No,
and
just one little story I saw. I faced a mini political scandal. A defeated candidate of the PC party given $10,000 contract for water purifiers for the cabinet offices.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
That was not very nice, was it?
Well, it's a very small contract, and we needed water conditioners in the legislature.
So somebody gave it to a Tory buddy.
Well, he happened to be a Tory, and most of the business people in the province of Saskatchewan are.
Mind you, if that's the worst thing that happens, you'll get a halo within a couple of months, won't you?
There you go.
Have you laid down strict rules for cabinet conduct? We've had great problems in other provinces, we won't name British Columbia, about expenses and whatnot. Are you going to watch for that kind of thing, sir?
Well, we've providing a new set of conflict of interest guidelines at the cabinet level, and all through also the top levels of the public service, because they have a great deal of influence. So it's our intention to be as honorable and have as much integrity as possible and to give it our best shot.
Good. Now, you're in now for, what's the tradition in Saskatchewan, 4 years?
4 years, with the possibility of 5 if you want to hang on that long.
And you're telling me that you're really quite firm in your position, that you are not, as one would have expected, going to slash the social programs as a really good right-wing Tory would want to do.
Oh, well, I don't agree with your definition of a good right-wing Tory.
I'm only looking at some of the elements in BC, no names, no background.
Because there are some top-notch Crown corporations that can be run well. But the point is we don't need to have nationalization, and we're not going to have extensive nationalization in the province under our administration. We will run health care as well as we can, social services, education. They belong in the public sector.
And you
we'll
did
do them well.
You did freeze cabinet ministers' wages.
Yes, we did.
And they'll be on the same guidelines as anybody else.
The cabinet portion of them will be 0, and then the ordinary MLAs are CPI -1 or whatever they can negotiate below that, but not above it.
When it comes to a federal election, are you one Premier who will campaign all out without hesitation for Joe Clark?
Certainly, unequivocally.
Unequivocally?
Yes.
No hang-ups?
No, he's the best guy for the job.
And you want to see Trudeau out?
Yeah, absolutely.
How soon should he get out?
Well, I suppose if he called an election today that we'd have a brand new administration in Ottawa, and the country would probably improve in terms of the dollar value and just general attitude. The perception is very important, and right now internationally, our perception is not good. And really, you can't blame the world, because we've gone from about 3rd in productivity to about 50th.
Yeah, I know that. I'm going to take some phones to you, Mr. Premier, if you don't mind, and I suspect it may degenerate into an adoring fan club. But let's try it. Questions, not just adoration, for the man from nowhere who now leads the Conservative government of Saskatchewan after the break. I was in deep in that. Go ahead to Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan.
Hello, Mr. Devine. I'd
Yes.
just like to comment on something that I read about that under Alan Blakeney, that the province of Saskatchewan was one of the better provinces, better off than any province in Canada, with around 4% unemployment, with a surplus in the Heritage Fund. And since you took over to keep your promises on lowering the price of gas and mortgages, that you have a huge deficit that the people will have to pay back. Are the people any better off under you than they were under Alan Blakeney?
Well, the two major programs that we had as campaign platforms, one was to reduce the gasoline tax, and the other was to provide 13% interest rate program for homeowners, were accepted widely by the population and endorsed in the legislature by the NDP. They backed up both programs, so they liked them. The problem was, we thought that there was money in the Heritage Fund for a rainy day, but when we opened up the books, there was no money in there. They had lent it out at no interest to Crown corporations, and 99% of the Crown corporations are losing money and continue to lose money. So the people suspected that That's why they voted the way they did, and when we opened up the books, it just confirmed it, that they'd lost a great deal of money and it wasn't there.
Let me get that clear. That $8 billion heritage fund, the public did not know before you took over that $800 million had been loaned out interest-free to Crown corporations.
Not only interest-free, but the fact that 27 or 26 of the Crown corporations were actually continuing to lose money, so that it was very difficult to get the money back out, as opposed to the Alberta Heritage Fund, where there's cash or something that can be closely converted to cash for a rainy day to put back in the economy. That's what a Heritage Fund is for.
All you had there for a new heritage fund was more debt, $800 billion of contingent liability, which might come back one day.
Well, exactly, and the kinds of things that they were investing in were continuing to lose money, so that it was even getting worse. We could look at pulp mills and so forth that were losing $16 million a year, and you can't market them on today's market because they wouldn't be worth that much, so we've got to be very careful with them.
What are you going to do with a pulp mill that loses $16 million a year?
First thing is to rearrange the management so we run it as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Do you want to get out of the pulp mill business as a government?
I said, and I'll state it again, we're looking at all the crowns. If we can make good money for the public investment, we will. If we can't, then we've got to put the money someplace else.
Go ahead from Nelson, BC.
Hello,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Devine. You're a breath of fresh air.
Well, thank you.
One question. This agricultural bill is just being passed. I don't know what they call it, MAP or Canagrex. Would
Yes.
you care to comment on it?
Well, Canagrex, from what I understand, is a move by the federal government to get into the agricultural business in a big way on an international market. And frankly, it just scares me to no end, because it's the kind of thing that the federal government has been doing at the national level that hasn't helped Canada. In fact, it's hurt us, because the rest of the world wonders what the federal government is doing. I believe that people in the farming business, in the timber business, in any kind of other business, are best left to operate that business. Government can help in difficult times, but not get in there and compete with them. And that Canagrex bill scares me.
Fair enough.
Good enough. Thank you very much.
Go ahead to Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan. Where are you?
Hello?
That's you, ma'am.
I'd like to ask Mr. Devine, what is the difference between government and the private sector buying up agricultural land? You certainly won't find the private sector selling to the original farmer at a loss, so why should the government take a loss now that you've taken over all the good that the NDP has done in your government?
Well, it's not that the government of Saskatchewan is going to take a loss. It's whether or not the government should own the farm. And that's I suppose, the threat of an NDP administration, that they can dress up in their three-piece suits and say that they're really just nice businessmen. But when they get in power, they buy out businesses. They buy out farms, and they buy out all kinds of things that the normal small businessman or woman gets into. And as a result, the government owns it and controls it. Now, people in Saskatchewan who know it very well said enough is enough is enough. And they say we don't want the government to buy any more farms or any more businesses or any more insurance companies. What we have there today is we'd like to have young people own the farm, and the government is trying to do that. Now, it's not about to lose a lot of money, but certainly I can say that we wish that the government didn't own 1 million acres of farms, because we'd rather have it in the hands of young people who are the heart and soul of Saskatchewan agriculture.
And you're selling it at market prices?
Yes.
Which ain't that high at the moment, I shouldn't imagine.
Well, I believe
What
that
is it for farmland?
the market price for farmland has leveled off some. And with the 8% interest program that we have for young people, it does make it easier for them to get into agriculture. But no doubt about it, the government of Saskatchewan and the NDP did raise the value of land, because you had the government in there as the major speculator, and that hurt a lot of young people.
But if I'm a young Saskatchewan farmer, I can come to you and buy a farm with up to $350,000 loan
Yes.
at 8%.
Yes.
So you're going to subsidize me between that and the market rate
That's right.
on a long-term mortgage?
Yes.
20 years.
Well, the first 5 years is at 8%. The next 5 years is at the market, or 12, whichever is the lowest. And then we'll re-evaluate it every 3 years, every 5 years, to find out what the interest rate is.
Plan to be in power that long?
Yes, sir.
Of course, you're only 37, 38.
Yes.
Deputy?
38.
38. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I lived in Saskatchewan at the time that Dick Culver was the head of the PC. At least he's the one. He was the leader of the PC, and he revived apparently the PC movement, and he brought it out of the wilderness. And I would like to know just what happened to him.
What happened to Dick Culver?
Mr. Culver if I understand it right, is now living in Phoenix and has a business operation there.
Good. How many leaders before you was he?
One.
Just one?
I took over from him.
What made you run anyway?
Well,
You were not active in politics,
No,
were you?
no.
You were
I just-
in business, MBA in business, you're an agricultural economist. And what were you doing? You were a civil servant at one time for the federal government.
Right.
How dare you admit that? What made you run?
I just thought there's so much more Saskatchewan could be if we had a change in the administration. And I suppose what it is the psychological impact that people had flown over Saskatchewan or driven across it or moved out and thought, I'll never go back there because there's an NDP administration. And now they can look at it differently.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
Yes, Premier Grant Devine.
Yes, sir.
We have land in Saskatchewan. We live in Kelowna.
Right.
Has legislation been changed regarding the Saskatchewan Farm Ownership Board?
No, but it's being reviewed because under the present legislation, people who are Canadians
Yes.
but live outside the province of Saskatchewan are not allowed to buy more than 10 acres.
This is what we've objected to, yes.
And I kind of think that it's one thing to treat an American or the Japanese or the West Germans as foreigners, but but other Canadians should be given full consideration in Saskatchewan. So we're reviewing that.
So it is being reviewed then.
Yes, sir.
And
And if you move back into the province of Saskatchewan, we'll hope that you could apply for some 8% money to buy the family farm.
Oh, but just a minute, you got to operate it to get the 8% money.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're not foreseeing a situation where somebody on the coast could buy it, live out here, and get somebody else to farm it.
No, it's for bona fide young farm couples or people.
Well, of course, you just demonstrated the reason why the NDP and other provincial governments didn't want the property rights in the Charter of Rights, correct?
Well, I don't think that that's the place to put them, because if you don't have the right to own property in the province of Saskatchewan, it would just scare the pants right off you.
Yeah, but you as a provincial premier of one of our great heartlands of wheat country, you've got to control that ownership somehow, or it could all finish up in the hands of the West Germans or the Americans.
Well, certainly, and we control it from an international point of view, but as far as Canadians, I don't think it's fair to have young people who they left Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and move into British Columbia or into Calgary trying to make enough money to buy the home farm, but they can't do it.
The present restriction of the man from Kelowna is provincial legislation,
That's
isn't
right.
it? And you're looking at that.
That's right.
And are you committed to lift it?
I'm committing to modifying it so that we can allow young people to come back into the province of Saskatchewan. Even though they're living in Calgary trying to make enough money to buy the home farm, they're not allowed to because they've moved out to make some money, and that's unfair.
And you didn't campaign that you would remove this restriction, did you?
No, I just said we would be reasonable in allowing young people
One
to
more
come home.
segment with Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan after the break. Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan. Now, go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you.
Yes, Premier Grant Devine.
Yes, sir.
It's nice to see a man on there that can look Webster in the eye.
It's a bit of a change, I must
Well, it's
confess.
from an Irishman to a Scotchman, I guess, so we didn't line it up that way.
I'm an Irishman, lad.
Thank you very much. You finished?
Hello.
Are you finished?
No.
Well, say something.
Okay. I just want to say, Grant Devine, that I was born and raised in the Humboldt district, and my mother's name was Devine.
Well, for heaven's sakes, I probably have heard a lot about Grandma Devine and West Devine that were in that same area, so nice of you to say hello.
You did?
Yes, sir.
God love you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You've only got one sin to answer for. I want to make a special application for Paola. There's a man that we want to send back to Hearn, Saskatchewan. And while he wouldn't be much of a farmer, if you could give him a grant and try him on a farm and keep him there. Do you know of whom I speak?
No.
You don't?
No.
The tiny perfect columnist, Alan Fotheringham.
Oh, I see.
He's from
Certainly.
Hearn, Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Most of us wish he had stayed there.
We'll see what we can do.
Go ahead, please.
Premier Devine, I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to ask you two questions.
Yes.
First, I would like to know if your hospitalization has to be paid on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis.
We don't have any hospitalization premium in the province of Saskatchewan.
Well, when I was living there, I had to pay it every year.
Well, you don't now, and you won't have to under our administration.
You're not going to put it back. You're
No.
not going to change Blakeney's magnificent hospital no premium system.
No, and it wasn't Mr. Blakeney's. I would give credit to Mr. Douglas for that.
Tommy Douglas. So no change. Okay, thank you. From Mill Bay, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Devine, I wanted to know how come your government has abandoned the people of Uranium City, Saskatchewan?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Well, if you recall, it was El Dorado Nuclear, which is a federal mine, a federal crown corporation, that pulled the pin on Uranium City.
Oh, I'm
And
quite aware of that. I lived in Uranium City for 28 years.
All right. Well, then you know that the Saskatchewan government wasn't involved. And in fact, if anything, we encouraged them to stay in operation in Uranium City, and they didn't. So the Saskatchewan government now has come up with $9,000 per family to help in the reallocation process.
Yeah, I understand that that applies to people who are still left there after the 8th of September. Those who couldn't afford to wait that long are out in the cold. Also, if your government were really serious about helping the people and getting compensation out of El Dorado and the federal government, I think they would stand up for them instead of washing their hands of the whole situation.
Well, we negotiate and continue to negotiate with the federal government to come up with more money. El Dorado runs the mine, and when they pulled out, we said we've got to have compensation and help for Saskatchewan people because this is a Saskatchewan community. And El Dorado said, well, this is all we'll do. We're going to pull it out. We won't give you any warning. It's gone. And Saskatchewan is left to help people there now. So we're providing $9,000 a family in the reallocation process, providing a winter road to help people transplant themselves into other communities. And we're looking at the whole question of Uranium City in terms of what it can be in the future. But as you know, it's 700 miles north of Regina, and there's just not all that many things that we can do with Uranium City at the present to make it a viable long-term community.
Just a moment, I need a little background. Uranium City, El Dorado Nuclear, which is part of the whole government panoply in this new organization they've got, was that not the most desirable nuclear yellow cake, and was that not being exported in long-term contracts?
Well, it was, but the argument they used is that the quality was going down and that the price was falling, so they had to close the mine. Now, we didn't buy that the productivity had fallen off because people have known the productivity and the percent of uranium in it for years. Similarly, with respect to markets, that's not new news. And I was there, well, I suppose a week before they finally decided to pull out, and they were still inviting people in. So it was a very, as the
How many
owner knows,
families? How many families?
about 3,000 people lived in Uranium City, and now it's down to about 700 or 800.
And 700 miles north of Regina, tough climate. That's just going to disappear from the face of the earth for the moment.
Well, no, it won't disappear from the face of the earth. We are looking at the possibility of how it can be used in terms of a service center for some northern communities. But there are already many areas in parts of Saskatchewan that are serving it, and we have to see what's viable and what's realistic.
And of course, your NDP, Blakeney and Company, did not object at any time to uranium mining, unlike their colleagues out here.
Well, it's...
Nor do you.
The NDP in one province would say one thing, in one province in another, and in the province of Saskatchewan, the NDP were buying uranium mines to develop them, so it's a little inconsistent.
But Mr. Devine, you're saying that you're providing $9,000 for people to relocate. Now,
yes,
that's going to be just a drop in the bucket because there aren't that many people there that weren't covered by either El Dorado or the, other large companies that, or the municipal government or something that would come under that program. So you're really going to be left there with having collected taxes. I know it wasn't your government, but the provincial government collected taxes for 30 years, got royalties out of that, and now for a mere pittance, they're going to get out from under and say, okay, we're fine, we're clean.
Okay, that's his point.
Well, if you worked for a mining company, the mining operations like El Dorado helped you move to another spot. In addition, we would provide $9,000 a family to help you move if the company that you were involved with wasn't associated with mining into another area, whether it's Saskatoon or it's Fort McMurray or wherever you might want to go to get a job. So I'm not sure what else we could do. The only other question was in terms of real estate value. If you owned a hotel and the hotel isn't worth anything, what furthermore could we compensate because the real estate values were declining, and we're negotiating with the federal government on that right now.
That's a hazard of doing business for a hotel owner.
There you go.
Isn't it? Right. My thanks to Premier Grant Devine of Saskatchewan. speaking today at the Board of Trade in Vancouver. Again, many thanks, sir.
Pleasure, Jack.
Next time I'll know more about you.
That's all right.
Now I'm going to interview an American surgeon, Dr. Richard Ellenbogen, after the break. The question now is, do I need a facelift? I don't think I need a facelift, but I've got a man in my studio this morning who took one look at me this morning, shuddered and reached for his scalpel to do some nipping and tucking. His name is Richard Ellenbogen. Of course he's from Beverly Hills. That's where everybody is nipped and tucked in every conceivable place until you go into a golf club sometimes in Palm Desert or whatnot, and every woman there is of indefinable age, between, 35 and 95. They all look precisely the same from the back, the side, and the front. They are not clones. They are plasticized surgery case. Am I being unfair to your skill, profession, craft, and medical standards?
I don't think so.
I'm not being unfair.
No, but I think you're being...
Would you agree with me that you and the likes of you have created a breed of human being in Southern California which, if you put them all in a lineup, you couldn't tell who the murderess was?
Well, I think there were almost 1 million people in the United States last year who had cosmetic plastic surgery. I don't know the statistics in Canada. People keep them a little bit more secret. But I think, myself coming from Beverly Hills, I think a lot of these styles will spread here, and someday maybe you'll have these same clones here in as you call them, in British Columbia.
Is it desirable?
Everybody likes to look as good as they possibly can. Some people a little bit more openly, and certainly plastic surgery is not for everybody. It's one modality that people can gain better self-image and better self-esteem.
I'm going to deal with you a little lightheartedly this morning because, first of all, there are areas where plastic surgery is an absolute miracle worker. After accidents, after gross disfigurements of one kind or another, plastic surgery makes life livable for many thousands of people around the world, correct?
Yes.
What I want to talk about is cosmetic surgery. Now, you look at my face. Now, supposing I was a bit player in Hollywood and didn't want to play fat, jolly characters, but wanted to play a kind of couth heavy, what would you do for me? Be clinical. Point at my face. Show me what you'd remove.
Rather than asking me, I think in your call and you can ask your viewers and see what they feel.
No, you're the expert. Could you remove the chin?
Yes, this is an operation I want to show a little bit today. It's a new operation which is called the platysma cervical lift. It's an operation which is based on the muscles in the neck.
But there are no muscles in my neck.
Underneath there are, I guarantee you, there are 2 muscles. And what this operation does, rather than the standard facelift operation, which pulls up on the face and creates some of these clones, which look very, very pulled, this is an internal sculpting operation and a reshifting of certain muscles in the neck. And I think, although you called certain work after accident cases miraculous, I think it's just as miraculous to take a woman who looks 60 and make her look 40. And I'm going to show some pictures of some people who have this new operation today. It's the first operation we could ever do where we can actually make somebody look considerably younger.
Well, I was listening to a bunch of old crones in California not so long ago. Old clones, did I say crones? And I heard one say to the other, but after 5 years my facelift collapsed and I had to have it all re-stretched again.
This is the old, what we now call the classical facelift operation. The new operation, which is called the platysma cervical lift. In the first 5 years I did this surgery, I did 340 operations. There were 4 that were redone in 5 years. The average redo rate of the facelift operation is about 40% in 5 years. So this is an operation which really lasts longer because what we're doing is we're actually doing prophylactic measures to prevent the face from again falling.
Yeah, but in the old days you just took a nip behind the ear, cut out the fat.
Exactly.
And pulled it up.
Exactly how it was done for 85 years. And this is an operation which has been done since 1975 and written about fairly extensively in the plastic surgical literature, but it hasn't made the lay publications yet.
I don't want any details of the other things, but you can take away bellies, behinds, and improve uplifts like mad.
Yes, if there's a market for something, there will be an operation that will improve it, yes.
I always remember going down to do a program with Carol Doda. Remember Carol Doda?
From San Francisco, yes.
The first of the great, what was that stuff they put in? Silicone. And the prediction was that eventually she'd have very large swollen ankles because all the silicone would finish up in her ankles. Did that ever come true?
You probably did this on a journalistic curiosity
that's
rather than
correct.
a personal curiosity.
That's correct.
Silicone does migrate. Injectable silicone in the United States is illegal because it does migrate. The reaction to silicone, once thought to be very inert, is really very, very strong. People who have silicone injected in their cheeks, it might end up in their jowls. Certainly, if it's injected in Carol Doda's breast, it may end up in the ankles. Bags of silicone are now used for breast enlargement. This, encased in its own capsule, doesn't allow the migration of the liquid fluid.
Used to know a girl, too, before we get to your things, who had a very pronounced Italian nose. Good-looking little girl. She had a huge Italian nose. Is that what you call it? What do you call these big noses?
Roman nose?
Roman nose?
Roman all over her face, yes.
Anyway, she had the plastic surgery. Her nose was straightened. A couple of years later, she had a baby, which had a Roman nose.
Yeah,
You can't hide it, can you?
No, you can't pass it on genetically
You
once you
can't
have
change the
plastic
genes.
surgery.
Okay. How am I for time this morning? All right for time? Okay, let's see some before and afters. I hope they're really gross, because otherwise...
Can I see a monitor? I can't
Well,
see
we've got to
the
have a
results.
monitor. Take a break and we'll put up... Oh, no. Yeah, we can see that monitor.
Okay, very good. This is a 49-year-old woman who had the new platysma cervical lift operation.
Just a minute. Is she 49 on the left or the right?
She's the same age. The operation doesn't change her age. She had a number of other procedures. She had her upper eyelids surgery performed, lower eyelid surgery performed, and the platysma cervical lift, which corrects the hanging under the neck that you were discussing before.
Yeah, hold that. Don't go away so quickly. Let's look at that. 49. How old is she looking at? 49. So you fixed up her eyebrows?
Her upper and lower eyelids, the bags above and below
Took
the
away
eyes.
the bags under the eyes?
Yes.
Took away all the slob in the chin line.
In the chin line.
Tucked it up, and she now looks a young 49 instead of an old 49. Is that right? Okay, now here's the nose one. Tell me about that one.
This is a male nose, just basically. Many kids in their 18, 19, 20 years old want to, it's not a loss of ethnicity or anything. They just want to look better. This is done to improve the self-image. People don't do this to be a different person. And this is a fellow with a very large nose, a breathing problem. He also has what they call a tethered upper lip, where he kind of snarls a little bit. And this is repaired just prior to him going to college.
That's interesting, that. You talked about loss of it. Give me back the other one. I want the other one back. Back the other one. You see, he's got much more character in his face on the left, hasn't he?
He would be a better character actor on the left, yes, but a lot of people don't like to be a character actor. They like to look as handsome as they can.
And he looks like a man on the left and a woman on the right.
That's a personal opinion. I think
And
he
his
looks a lot
Adam's
better on the
apple
right.
is the same. You never change Adam's apples, do you?
There is an operation to make an Adam's apple smaller,
I remember
yes.
that years ago. Some people used to have really incredible Adam's apples. I can't find my Adam's apple. Next one.
This is a girl with a hook nose, looking somewhat like Barbara Streisand, before and after nasal surgery.
Yeah, that's right. Barbara Streisand on the left and just another dolly on the right. But that's a nice change, isn't it? Is that always done because of breathing problem or purely for cosmetic purposes?
It can be done for both. Usually when I do cosmetics changes, I'll change the inside of the nose to make sure that they breathe better after the surgery.
What does a nose job cost in the States?
Anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on the practitioner
so?
and the city that it's in. And the
Now, here's
difficulty.
an interesting one.
This is another one of those platysma cervical lifts. This is the operation that some commentators would benefit a little bit from. What it does is it gets rid of the hanging underneath the neck, showing the jawline again, and again shows the Adam's apple.
Yeah, that's a big... Oh, now, here's a man at last. Now, what have you done to him? Because he ain't no beauty on the right or the left. Oh, you've cleaned up his eyes. You've pulled up above his eyes. You've given him larger eyes. You haven't touched his nose.
No, this is... People will center in on what things bother them about their appearance. This is a typical example of California sun abuse. The severe wrinkles underneath the eyes, the bagging over the eyes. The man actually has a visual disturbance because his eyelids are so heavy they touch his eyebrows and, his eyelashes make him blink all the time. By giving him eyelids above and straightening him out below a little bit, it makes him look a little bit fresher and a little bit better.
And now, would he come for that? That would be his choice to do that.
Yes, that was what he asked me to do.
Now, yeah.
This is a young actress in her 20s with premature aging. A lot of people think that this is related to late hours, drinking, whatever. Basically, this is heredity. You can see the bags under her eyes prior to the surgery.
How old would she be there?
28. And this is the removal of the bags under her eyes after the surgery on the right.
Yeah.
There's
a difference.
More typical patient we get with bags above and below the eyes is a woman like this. This is from sinus problems, before surgery on the left and after surgery on the right, removing the bags above and below the eyes.
Just hold that one a second. I mean, it hasn't made it look any younger, it's just made it look a lot better. Hey?
Makes her look a lot better and a lot fresher. Makes her feel better. That's the real purpose for doing the surgery.
These are real bags under her eyes, aren't they?
Is that a before up on the monitor now?
How long would the operation take?
The eyelid surgery takes approximately a half hour per eyelid, there being 4 eyelids. Someone looks good after the surgery.
4 eyelids?
Yes. Upper.
There were 2 eyelids.
2 uppers, 2 lowers, we call it.
Oh, yeah.
So the whole operation for all 4 takes about 2 hours. Somebody will look good, and particularly in my community, they ask when they will look good again on tape or on film, which is about 2 to 3 weeks after surgery.
So I could get it done during Christmas?
Yeah, she could come right down and...
And nobody would know me when I got back?
They would still know you, I'm afraid.
But I'd need the tummy gut too, and that would take a couple of months, wouldn't it?
That's an operation which takes a little longer, the tummy operation. That's almost totally a woman's operation. In other words, a woman whose abdomen is stretched out after pregnancy. That's an operation that takes maybe a good month to get back to full activity.
Jeez, big demand for it. Now that the depression's up here, the business will be off.
There's
recession.
There's a recession in the United States, obviously, too, but as far as my business is concerned, it's been pretty busy for the last year or so.
Richard Ellenbogen, MD, Diplomate, American Board of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgeons, Los Angeles?
Yes.
Beverly Hills?
Beverly Hills, yes.
Any inside gossip for us? Who was it? I wanted to know if somebody had facelifts. God, who was it? Anyway, we'll gossip with Richard and he'll answer your questions. So change after the break. The likes of Cary Grant must have had whole successions of facelifts, mustn't they?
Many people in Hollywood have, out of necessity for their work, had to have something to make them look as good as they have for many years. Hollywood has certainly popularized this type of cosmetic surgery, but I would say probably 80% of my practice are just people who want to look better and feel a little bit fresher. And
is there any
react a
famous
little
classic case of somebody whom we know about? We know all about Frank Sinatra and his hair transplant and all that kind of jazz. That's routine nowadays, isn't it?
Fairly routine, yeah. It's not in my community, particularly in Beverly Hills. People have facelift parties coming out when they look good. It's not something that's hidden anymore. And I think one of the most important things that we've done in plastic surgery in California is we do the surgery in small clinics and we do it as an outpatient.
And they're purely private.
Yes.
I mean, you got to pay cash for all this kind of thing.
Yes, most of it is. Some of it is covered by insurance. Baggy upper eyelids are covered by insurance if they block
If
vision,
they block the vision.
Like that man we showed. But most of this is just an acquisition like a car or something like that. It is elective surgery, not covered by insurance.
That's right. Cosmetic.
Yes.
Vanity.
Vanity.
Does
yes.
it do you any long-range damage? Can it do you long-range damage?
Well, the person that is...
I mean, after you've had your face all stretched about, do you have to stay out of the sun?
I keep people out of the sun in California about 60 days. Usually this is sufficient. As far as any long-term damage, no.
Okay, you've got 2 calls. All our people are perfectly beautiful and don't want to speak to Richard. My, that's unusual. I thought you'd been... Maybe all my people have already had them or don't need them. Go ahead to Richard Ellenbogen. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, Jack, I think it's fantastic. You look great without that chin under there.
Do you think I should have a chin lift?
Yes, definitely.
You're joking.
You can only improve such a handsome face.
I am more than just a pretty face.
I would like to know what the cost of such an operation would be.
The platysma cervical lift operation, maybe about 20% of plastic surgeons do this, have replaced the old facelift operation with this. The fees in the United States run anywhere from $2,500 to $6,000, depending on the city it's done in, the accommodations, and the skill of the practitioner.
Do many plastic surgeons get sued? Oh, yes, there was a famous one who sued a plastic surgeon 1,000 times. The ugly, ugly one with the hair. Come on. Who? Phyllis Diller.
You know, as far as I heard in the scuttlebutt, the gossip of Hollywood, she's very, very pleased with her plastic surgery.
You remember all the fuss about her supposedly suing people? Or maybe that was just a National Enquirer. Okay, you're going to get one, Grandma?
I think so.
You certainly need one. God. With a mind like yours, you also need a facelift. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yes, just one question there to the doctor in regards to how much it would cost to have the stomach fat removed and the sides or the love handles removed and remodeled, and if scarring would appear or could it be invisibly sewn up?
The operation, the tummy tuck operation, or the abdominal lipectomy, is an operation that's done in a hospital. It's a fairly serious operation. It's not something that's done in an office. The fees in Los Angeles run any place between $3,000 and $6,000. These do leave some scar. There is an operation called a butt lift, a thigh lift, which is done. These leave fairly significant scars. It's not a particularly popular operation. The fees in Los Angeles run any place from $3,000 to $6,000.
In having the stomach fat removed, does this lay you up for a while?
Generally, somebody, until they're back to full activity, someplace in a month or 6 weeks. Whereas many of the surgeries I showed, nose job, face, platysma, cervical lift, eyelid surgery, people are generally back to their normal activities within a couple of days and full activities within a couple of weeks.
There's a friend of mine, Andrea Stewart, who asked me to have Dr. Ellenbogen on this morning. I thought it might be good for a wet Monday morning, which it is. And if you want to know about some seminars he's holding, and are you touting for business or just telling people what can be done?
I'm just having a vacation, and while I was up here, I'm doing
Phone
this
Andrea
seminar.
at 685-5651. 685-5651. That's actually Hermes Travel. Now, next one. What are love handles? Are that rolls of fat around your tummy?
I think they're more on the side.
She's what a repulsive program. Only joking. Go ahead, please. Where are you? Yes.
Yes, I have a question. I was wondering, I have my son has a real short upper lip, and he shows a lot of gum. I'm just wondering if it would be, bad for a child, say about 10 years old, to have an operation, plastic surgery done to correct it.
Yeah, this is called a tethered lip. It was somewhat similar to what I showed on that boy with a nose job. This is done from inside the nose and is a fairly successful operation. Generally, we like to wait until people are about 16 or 17, but if the kids are making a lot of fun of them, we overweigh, since this surgery is done for their emotional well-being, we overweigh the emotional scars as opposed to the physical scarring, and we do it early. Particularly, some of the other operations we do early are when ears stick out. We can do this as early as 6 years old.
There's not a lot of pain, eh?
Not particularly a painful operation, no.
Okay, thank you.
It's called a tethered lip.
Tethered lip.
Okay.
Thank you. Useful call. It's not all just silly. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I had a glaucoma operation on my left eye about 8 or 9 years ago, and it left my eyelid very droopy. And I had an operation to lift that, but since then it's come back again. But I would like to have another one, but can I have an anesthetic that I am completely off? I mean, I was just, local last time, and it's rather nerve-wracking.
This is called eyelid ptosis. Many people will have this kind of a sleepy look to their eyes, particularly after a glaucoma operation. What is done, it's a very simple operation which is done through the upper eyelid where the muscle which opens the eye is lifted up a little bit. Generally, most doctors will prefer to have the patient under a very light anesthesia so they can cooperate. Certainly, the sleeping eye is not the same as the awake eye. It's an operation that takes about 20 minutes. Certainly, the results are much better under a light anesthesia than they are under a deeper anesthesia. We have to guess exactly how much to open the eye.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Useful call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm wondering if your guest realizes that most men with big noses seem to be much better endowed in the male genital area than men with small noses. Now, I find big noses in men very attractive, and I'm wondering if your guest realizes that, is there going to be any shrinkage in the other area? I mean, this,
somebody's having us on.
Nose operation.
Doctor, somebody's having us on.
I guarantee if the nose is made smaller, the other part will not indeed get smaller as well.
That's what I said, 685-6561. That's what I said. What idiot said I didn't say that? Where am I? Victoria, go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I wonder if you could, if the guest can tell me what anesthetic he uses for a nose and a face operation.
It depends. I have in my office an anesthetist, and the anesthesia is tailored to the patient. It reminds me of an interesting story. I had a patient who was a very famous writer, and we're starting to put him to sleep to do his facelift. And he says, I don't want to go to sleep. I want to know everything that's happening so I can write about this. So the right anesthesia for him is to be quite awake, whereas most people just want to be out of it. Just do it, doctor. Wake me up later when it's done. And but it's generally tailored to the personality.
I see.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks.
I want to be right out of it when it's done. Go ahead, please.
Hi, John. Yeah, I'm one of your younger watchers, and I was just wondering, like, I'm extremely overweight. I'm 6'1", and I push the scale to just about 300 pounds.
You are. You're obese.
And, well, I'm built pretty big. Everybody wanted me to go into football and that.
Anyway, what's your question?
But a lot of people, you know, kind of afraid to get with all those other big guys. Is there the operation where they take off the stomach and the thighs? Would it cut down my weight factor any?
Is he talking about this bowel resection or whatever?
Basically what's done, there are a number of operations which called gastric bypasses or intestinal bypasses, and there's a new thing called gastric wrapping, which cuts down your caloric intake. I'm basically the person who gets you after at 6'1", you should be about between 180 and 205 pounds. When you reach your optimal weight, where I trim you down, this is called body sculpting. There are operations that are done for the abdomen, for the behind, particularly in men who are overweight, develop breasts. But I'm the person who gets you after you have lost all that weight.
Richard, good. Richard Ellenbogen, you've been a delightful guest this morning. The contact for some of the little seminars he's holding is at 685-6561. That's right, isn't it? Hermes Travel. Thanks, Richard. Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
And I'll be back after the break. I've got 3 That's a Fair questions I want to give you this morning before they get too old and out of date. And here's the first one. Is the BC Teachers Federation using non-union workers for the new building project in Vancouver? BCTF is not building the building. It's the Teachers Investment and Housing Cooperative that's involved. The project is now underway at the corner of 28th and Dunbar, and the co-op, which uses funds invested by teachers and their relatives, says it didn't have any choice in the matter. But because of pressure from the BCTF and the Carpenters Union, the Teachers Co-op says that from now on, in normal circumstances, only unionised personnel will be used in projects financed by the Teachers Co-op. Here's a good one. If I have a heart attack while driving, does ICBC refuse to pay for damages? Bizarre, but true. ICBC won't pay for damages if it considers the accident to have been inevitable. Mrs. Dom, in this case, mailed us documents that showed that her father died instantly after suffering a massive heart attack this last September and crashed into the front yard of a neighbour. Because the accident happened after the heart attack, ICBC says the accident had to happen, was inevitable, no negligence. No negligence, no settlement. It's that simple. ICBC says that's not its policy, but that of the civil courts. Theoretically, I suppose, if you sneeze because you have an allergy and you hit a parked car, now, could that be inevitable? There is a grey area here, too, where on testing in the courts, it sometimes changes. Next one. Is it true that 5 log scalers were bumped in Vernon and that their jobs as log scalers were given to hospital orderlies who had more seniority? Comes from Vernon. Partly true. The Delview Long-Term Care Hospital in Vernon was being closed out, and Ed Hewitt, the district manager for forestry in Vernon, confirmed hiring 6 ex-hospital employees, 2 cooks, 2 janitors and 2 orderlies, seasonal workers for the jobs. 5 seasonal workers with BCIT certificates on log scaling were terminated, but their contracts had expired, and the ex-hospital workers will be doing manual labour for the forestry branch in Vernon, not log scaling. I thought I had another one. Let's see, Olsen has come back to haunt us again. I don't think it's a matter for any great personal panic or any great panic on the Olsen caper. Supposedly to put his hands, gruesome thought that it is, on 2 more bodies, and identification, I think it is, of the clothing of a body already found. Well, for the sake of the parents, it's essential, for parents who want to make sure, it's essential that they use this gross creature for these essential purposes. I am quite confident, without even asking anybody, that no deals have been made to extend the previous arrangement. There's just not the slightest shadow of that. And I'm encouraged by the remarks which say that when he finds the bodies, he goes back to Kingston. Apparently he has made some request to go to Matsqui, but he doesn't belong here. He belongs in Kingston Pen. It's just one of these sad, although I must compliment BCTV on their exclusive coverage of his arrival, because the one thing we must know in the public is we must know what's happening, that's for sure. We want to make quite sure that when this creature is brought out to the coast here, we can keep an eye on the conduct of the authorities, because they were very difficult to deal with on some occasions the last time round. I always keep hoping that's the last time we'll ever see or hear anything of this particular creature. Okie dokie. Any calls that I can take? Nothing? Well, I'll take a break and come back for a couple of calls after the break. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I had taken a bet that they would bring Mr. Olson back, and he is back. And I think that when they made an agreement once and paid him off for the location of children, how come it's on again? You know,
It would seem there's a possibility of more new bodies, previously unconnected with his confessions of guilt, and it's very difficult, I should imagine, to avoid the pressure of parents who want to find out for sure. But I'm quite confident in my own way, and I know nothing about it, that there'll be no extension of that.
Are you sure he isn't just being brought back because it's Christmas time and he wants to be close to his family?
I'm quite sure that could not be the motive. He's a con man. The trouble is he might be saying, I know 10 more or 11 more, and trying to pull this as his holiday junket. I suppose after this one, he should be given the one last chance to turn up any more of his unfortunate victims. Then he should close the book on him for now and forevermore. But there's no possible way they can possibly be succumbing to any con.
I feel really bad for the families, the parents of these children that have to
Yeah, so do I.
over again at Christmas time.
Maybe we should have all kept our mouths shut and not told anybody was here, but we don't operate that way, nor are we likely to operate that way. You got to know what's going on as well as us. Go ahead, please. Yes. Hello.
Hello?
That's you, ma'am.
Yes, I'm phoning about the Red Hot video. I don't agree with the women burning it, but I wanted to know the women that make these tapes, if there's any evidence of drugs involved or...
Almost certainly, ma'am. I wish we could talk about it, but I can't. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely. Premier Devine of Saskatchewan with Webster on check at midnight. Colonel Levy is really paratrooper from Beirut on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. Colonel Levy is really paratrooper from Beirut on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. My thanks to John Sawatsky. Watch Webster again next week.